Good afternoon and welcome to this special edition of the Federal Executive Forum celebrating 17 years of profiling IT mission programs in the federal government. This is our second annual Profiles in Excellence Chief Data Officer program, which will be coming to you from the virtual studios of WTOP and the Federal News Network. I'm Luke McCormack, and during today's show, we will discuss big data analytics and artificial intelligence trends and strategies at numerous government agencies, and hear from key leaders making them happen. With me on today's show are Tom Sasela, Chief Data Officer, Department of Navy; Kirsten Dablow, Chief Data Officer, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission; Dr. Alan Sim, Chief Data Officer, Center for Disease Control and Prevention; Dr. Matthew Gravis, Chief Data Officer, Department of State; Nicholas Spiess, Chief Federal Technologist, Snowflake; Nick Saki, Principal Technologist, Office of the CTO, North American Public Sector, Pure Storage; and Howard Levinson, Vice President, Public Sector Strategy, Databricks Federal. Well, it just occurs to me that probably a decade ago, it seemed like all we did is spend our time trying to wrestle this data around and get it to a point where we could actually process it and use it. Quite frankly, I remember having data scientists do that. They spend about half their day doing it. Not anymore. At this point, way up the value chain. Can't wait to hear all the great work that's going on. Tom, let's start with you. Give us the state of the status of what is happening in your community at the Navy.
Well, thanks. Hey, good afternoon, everyone. We've spent a lot of time over the last almost 3 years now standing up the data management program in the Department of the Navy. So it's been super exciting to be part of that process and being the first data officer there, actually. And so what we've done over the last couple of years is really kind of set the foundation to move forward, as you mentioned, with kind of making data part of the daily decision-making process and creating operational advantage in the Department of the Navy. So I would say for us, we've been kind of down at the fundamentals, standing up some governance, putting some policies and processes in place, also creating a community of individuals in the department that are aware of data and their abilities to use data to make decisions. And so we've also established an enterprise data platform to make that data available and accessible to people. And provide a place for people to actually exploit data for decision-making purposes, support the operations of the department, and also, any of the contingency operations that we're engaging in. So super exciting time.
Thank you very much. It sounds fascinating. Kirsten, give us the state of the state at Federal Energy. A lot of action going on at Energy these days, a tremendous amount of activity going on with various types of energy sources, et cetera. Give us 10 seconds. What does the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission do? And then tell us how you're doing over there in regards to what you got cooking.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me here today. I'm excited to see all of you. FERC's mission is economically efficient, safe, reliable, and secure energy for consumers. So we're really regulating the energy markets. So, obviously, from my perspective, data underpins all of this work. We have all of our administrative and operational data tracking all of our day-to-day work. We have a lot of statutory requirements in terms of how we respond to requests from the public, orders and other things. So we have to make sure that we're meeting all of those statutory requirements. So we track a lot of data to ensure we never miss any of our statutory deadlines. Of course, we have all of our HR financial contracts type data. And then we have a large volume of a lot of kind of mission data. So we're watching market data, trading and financial data between energy providers and regulated entities, performance metrics of operators. We get a fair amount of subscription data in from various subscription services that are tracking and monitoring grid behavior. So we use all this data to, like I said, monitor the markets. We're looking for fraudulent behavior, making sure no one's doing bad stuff, trying to game the markets. We're trying to anticipate reliability issues on the grid. We're inspecting energy infrastructure, doing a lot of economic, geographic, and environmental impact analyses of policies and regulations to ensure that our policies are having the impacts that we expect them to have. So where my team comes into all of this, so my team's mission is to support FERC through leadership, governance, policy setting, advisory services, and collaborative outreach to optimize enterprise data and information assets. And in our strategic plan, we have targeted data objectives to mature data stewardship and improve data-driven decision-making. So to support these objectives, there's sort of three broad areas that my team really focuses on. So we have to effectively manage all of the information collections that come into FERC. So not that I want to get into a world of paperwork reduction act, but FERC currently maintains about 115 control numbers with OMB to collect data, which really extrapolates into about over 200 some collections of data. So that means we need to make sure that we're being very thoughtful about all of that data coming in from the public and our regulated entities. We need to make sure that we're being thoughtful about any burden imposed on them, and that data can come into us as cleanly as possible to make it as useful as possible. I mean, as you mentioned, with data scientists, we want to be able to move them up the value chain. We don't want them to just be spending all of their time just cleansing the data. We want them to be able to use the data. So we want to make sure all of those information collections are as we are making sure they're machine readable, that they're usable, all that kind of stuff. The second big piece, really, building and maturing data governance. So we want to make sure that we're improving the coordination across the entire data lifecycle, establishing a data stewardship framework. So all of our data stewards across the commission have a strong understanding of what their responsibilities are, what those expectations look like, and defining and governing our conceptual data architecture. So we know what all of our those entities and attributes across our data look like. And then to make sure all of this works together, and to get into the topic today around AI and big data, we are building an analytics platform. So this is a cloud-hosted data and analytics platform that provides easier access to all of our data for our analysts to make use of the various data technologies available. So this really is kind of a tangible delivery of the information collections coming in, our data governance activities. Sometimes I like to think of our analytics platform as the carrot that inspires people to want to comply with these very bureaucratic governance activities. And so within that, we have a number of technologies. We have data prep tools, we have ETL tools, metadata management, modeling tools, various data science notebooks capabilities, analytics, visualizations, business intelligence type tools, and then also a data governance and stewardship tool as well. So there's we sort of have a number of capability swim lanes.
A lot of activity going on there. We're looking forward to a specific use case. So appreciate that. And some of that sounds very familiar. So thank you for that.
Yeah,
Dr. Alan Sim, I can't imagine the plethora of activity that you have going on over at the Center for Disease Control and Prevention and what you've been doing over the last 2 to 3 years. Give us a top line state of the state.
Yeah, good afternoon. I really appreciate being here with the distinguished panel. And yeah, we've been a little bit busy at CDC,
and we appreciate everything that you have done over the last 3 years, quite frankly. I want to make sure to say that.
Thank you. And I always like to start by just thanking all of not only our federal staff at CDC, but also our state, local, tribal, territorial partners, all the folks that work with CDC. It is a team effort in terms of responding to this, the multiple pandemics, as well as just protecting our nation's health. So just want to start off with that. So obviously, two major efforts at CDC that's been going on, pandemic preparedness activities, addressing COVID-19, monkeypox, a number of other public health emergency responses. While we have dealt with public health emergencies before, obviously, I don't think we've ever encountered one at the breadth, scale, and scope of COVID. And so this has sort of forced us to reevaluate not only our technology choices, but sort of our data governance structure, our decisions to process high volume, as well as a variety of data sources in a short period of time. The second effort, actually prior to COVID, was really examination of our daily operations. We've sounded the alarm about the needs of our aging and under-resourced public health infrastructure. And so we launched something called the Data Modernization Initiative, or DMI. And the goal of DMI is to modernize our siloed and brittle public health information systems to become more streamlined, connected, and responsive to empower public health professionals to prevent issues before they arise, as well as respond quickly and effectively when public health emergencies occur. And so I think some of the use cases, which I'll go in more detail, but leveraging new technologies, cloud services, lake houses, other open source approaches and technologies to process, billions of vaccine administration records, millions of testing, COVID testing lab data on a daily basis. In addition to just the big data activities related to the response, we've been prototyping, and then we launched an enterprise data analytics and visualization platform called EDAV. It's a service for our programs to leverage cloud and data technologies to launch dashboards, modernize their analytical processing, and improve business intelligence capabilities. So between these two major efforts, CDC is very actively exploring and adopting, leveraging new technologies to solve mission critical problems in public health.
It sounds like you're really laying the framework down for some great use cases there, and we certainly appreciate it. Matt, how about at the Department of State? I know there's a lot of activity going on there, a lot of global events, and a lot of decision making that has to happen.
Every day is different, Luke.
Absolutely.
That's for sure. Great to be with you. Great to be with the fellow CDOs and our industry partners. I get to spend a lot of time with them as part of the Federal Chief Data Officer Council, which is a great forum to share lessons learned across the federal government. We believe in copying over creating, right? Because we want to find efficiencies and steal each other's great ideas. So we've been able to do that quite a bit. I, in addition to being the Chief Data Officer, I also lead the Center for Analytics for the Department of State. And so we started a few years ago, to kind of give you a sense of it. We started a few years ago, just a few people doing analytics on Iran sanctions. And then that kind of snowballed into another project. And next thing you know, we were pretty large, and bringing in the Chief Data Officer role into the department. I joined a couple of years ago. And now we have a data strategy. We're a year into the data strategy. We're executing the strategy through a series of 6-month data campaigns focused on foreign policy and management priorities like the EIA within the workforce, like strategic competition, multilateralism, cybersecurity, things like that. And I think the pivot that I've really had personally is to invest more effort on workforce and infrastructure. We have the political capital built through analytics and delivering good services to the rest of the department. But we want to lift all boats across the department. And so we're doing a number of hiring initiatives that hopefully I'll get to talk a bit more about later. And as Kirsten talked about, bringing infrastructure and a data platform that can be leveraged across the department. That's that kind of other really important piece that will have a long-term effect for the department.
Yeah, really laying that framework down is so important to stacking all these capabilities on top of it. Nicholas, we can't do this unless we have some good technology underpinning all of this capability so that these very important data scientists and executives can make these decisions. Give us a state of state at Snowflake.
Yeah, thanks, Luke, very much. And again, I'll repeat the thanks. It's great to be on a panel with all these fine folks. A couple of years ago, we started with President's Management Agenda that started in the Obama administration, continued very, very vigorously into the Trump administration, and now into the Biden administration. We moved into HR 1770. We built the CDO Council out, and now you can go to state.gov/artificial-intelligence, right? If that's not a trend, I don't know what is. Technology partners have always brought great technology to the US government, whether you're at the state level or the federal level. That's not up for debate. What is up for debate is how fast that technology is adopted. And I know, talking to Dr. Sim and hearing feedback from Kirsten as well, there's a ton of data out there. And our government customers, our government partners are no longer afraid of advancing and kind of moving more towards the bleeding edge. There's never been a better time in government for technology. We're solving really, really big problems. And a lot of that comes down to being able to move algorithms to the data instead of extracting data and throwing it at an algorithm, which takes a lot of time and a lot of expense. I think that's a major technology trend that software as a service companies like Snowflake have really brought to the forefront to allow our customers to really get at that data and really start looking for big trends. Kirsten covered it perfectly. You've got a massive amount of data, and the more data you have, the more outliers you'll be able to identify. And that's really the interesting stuff for a lot of our problems, not for all of them, obviously, but for a lot of what we're looking for, the outliers are what the interesting thing is. I'm sure Dr. Sim would also agree with that. So I think seeing all the trends in the federal government and state government and higher education, everybody's moving towards these AI and ML models. I love the technology that we're seeing, and I love the benefits the citizens gain from those technologies.
Bingo on that last comment there. Nick, Pure Storage, way bigger than storage. Give us a state of the state about what you're seeing across the community and what Pure Storage is up to as far as enabling that.
Well, and to echo all the rest of my colleagues, it is a great occasion to be on this panel today and to talk with all these wonderful.
Got a lot of horsepower on this panel today.
Indeed. What we're seeing, of course, is data's continued to explode. The demand to leverage data has obviously continued to explode with not just, the traditional big data applications, but also obviously the advent of artificial intelligence and machine learning. And the number and types of data sets has significantly increased in variety as well as volume. Like, for example, 3 years ago, there was no COVID database. And as Dr. Sim said, now there are billions of shot records that go along with that. That's brand new data. But what can we know about it? And the impediment to a lot of this is we have focused and invested a lot of our energy into developing higher capacity, higher efficiency, again, simple to implement and powerful to leverage tools for delivering data or making data available and enabling these algorithms and models to leverage that data. To Nicholas's point, without having to move the data around, or worse yet, having to try and move algorithms to data. So we're seeing the implementation of data hubs. We're seeing cataloging and aggregation of data into coherent sets that then new training models can be unleashed on. We've had a lot of success in the national security space in this regard. And obviously, we've been a proud partner of the CDC and HHS throughout the pandemic. There almost is no limit to the variety or type of artificial intelligence algorithms that can be applied. If you can dream it up, if it's something that you want to know, then data scientists are now in a much better position to actually focus on that aspect of the creativity and not have to worry about data cattle ranching, as it were. So that's really where our focus has been. How do we build the infrastructure that frees up people to focus on productive activity while delivering data services and data leverage at scale?
Really do appreciate that. We're going to take a short break and we'll be right back. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on the Federal News Network. Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Network. We are talking about data analytics and artificial intelligence trends. We were just going over a state of the state, and I want to throw it over to you, Howard, at Databricks. Tell us a little bit, where does Databricks fit into this ecosystem? And give us a state of the state about what you're seeing across the community.
Yeah, thanks so much, Luke. And thank you to all the other panelists. Honored to be here. From a Databricks perspective, we're seeing what people like Kirsten and Tom have already said, that the data volumes are growing rapidly. But more importantly, the types of data that people are receiving today are full text, they're imagery. It's beyond the structured data that data warehouses handled so well for so many years. And so today, if you're trying to do evidence-based decision making, you've got to have the ability to analyze other data types besides the structured data. People have tried to do this with data warehouses and data clouds. It just doesn't work. And that's why Databricks has built this capability we call the Lakehouse. The Lakehouse is really the best of the data warehouse and the best capabilities of the data lake. And a lot of this has been incorporated in the DoD. Tom, you're probably very familiar with the DoD data decrees, which say, sharing has to be, fundamental to what we do. Instead of, need to know, it's need to share today. Cataloging the data, using open source and open storage technologies, secure access control and encrypting all of the data. Those are all incorporated into the DoD data decrees, and those are things that Databricks aligns really well with.
Yeah, super important. And again, I see this conversation talking about framework done. We're going up the value chain. Let's start talking about specific examples. Dr. Sin, I'm going to ask you first. Can you give us a specific example of an enabling capability that you'd like to highlight for the community?
Sure, Luke. Absolutely. There are a variety of use cases, obviously.
Sure.
I think one is the National Center for Immunizations and Respiratory Diseases, NCIRD. They were largely the pioneers in adopting big data technology in the cloud space, as well as processing the high volume and variety of data related to COVID tests, immunizations, in conjunction with HHS and the HHS Protect system. So for COVID specifically, NCRD implemented a lakehouse platform that received vaccine supply chain, distribution, provider, and administration data from over 100 plus data sources daily, and delivered curated data products within hours each day to facilitate public health decision-making and action at federal, state, and local levels. As I mentioned earlier, the platform has 1.2 billion vaccine administration records and serves over 50 different data products readily accessible via storefront for users to leverage using a wide variety of enterprise data visualization analytical tools. I think the opportunity, though, is, as been mentioned by the other panelists, we can do things in silos in a different way, but not only the sharing of data, but the sharing of algorithms. And so part of my role is to help with the culture change to encourage that sort of collaboration, the reuse and sharing of those algorithms so that they can be applied to other situations, other public health emergencies, other responses, instead of being these large one-offs. So we're definitely going to take the lessons learned from NCRD and our many number other programs and partners from the pandemic response and apply it to help rebuild and modernize our public health infrastructure.
Sounds fascinating. Thank you. Nicholas, how about at Snowflake? Can you give us an example of a specific program that perhaps you're helping to enable or have enabled that you'd like to highlight?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. We have a couple of use cases that are really strong in the big data analytics space. Healthcare is one, and sort of more specifically in healthcare is fraud, waste, and abuse. A couple of our customers now were in a position where they were using open source software, which is a little bit more complex, takes more development dollars. There's a lot of engineering that has to happen. It's not a direct mapping. Software as a service has solved a lot of this. It's easy to go out and spend 20% of your budget to solve 80% of your problem by buying a commercial off-the-shelf product that gets you to that point where you can take 80% of your budget and solve that last 20%, which is your unique mission space. Trying to develop these really complex data pipelines in products that are more of a portfolio than a platform is really complex. So what we've tried to do at Snowflake is make it easier to get very, very close to that end solution, building out those data pipelines, getting all those data types into one place so they can be analyzed by a massive amount of parallel compute resources. And that really enables those big data analytics, that fraud, waste, and abuse analytics, those outliers we talked about earlier. That's really the key to getting that use case worked out.
Right. And fraud, waste, and abuse, super important in our community. Kirsten, you walked us through a whole bunch of different activities you have going on over there. It's sort of a top line. You want to highlight a specific use case that you'd like to bring to the attention of the community?
I'll highlight a program here. So I mentioned the analytics platform that we're building out. This is our cloud-hosted data and analytics platform. One of the first big programs that we initiated on this platform, it kind of got us a jump start into the cloud, was we found an opportunity to modernize our reporting infrastructure. We had a very old legacy reporting infrastructure. They were sort of PDF-based reports. There were about 530 of them. They were all sort of being individually used. They were kind of inconsistent in any type of governance around them. So we were able to
You're making my head spin.
I know.
Oh.
So we were able to implement an enterprise business intelligence solution and basically move all of these reports to our cloud infrastructure through this enterprise BI and implement data governance practices around this. So I think it was a great opportunity to get us an entrance into the cloud platform and teach governance through the modernization of these reports. So we basically consolidated these 530 reports down to about 50 and applied these our data governance and data standards to this. And then we could enable self-service reporting around certified data assets. So this was a great entrance to the cloud, as well as introducing data governance practices to the commission. It was also a great way to touch all of our program offices. So it was a really, it really helped our ability to kind of build trust with what we were doing. And those reports touch on all manner of things. I mean, there's the operational tracking of statutory responsibilities, there's dam safety activities. We are a commission, so we facilitate a monthly commission meeting. So there's the coordination around that and the reporting around that. We're using it to track basic trading behavior. So there's a number of things those reports and certified data assets do for the self-service reporting. So that's the big program that I'd like to highlight.
Wow, sounds like a win-win-win-win. So that was fantastic. Really do appreciate that. Howard, how about at Databricks? Can you give us an example of a specific program, perhaps working with the various agencies that you'd like to highlight?
Well, I think Dr. Sim and Kirsten already have done that, but we'll share some others, and hopefully Tom and Dr. Gravis will do the same. For Databricks, I like to talk about work we started doing at Dr. Gravis's former agency, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, where they literally started out using Databricks as a data warehouse. They had some really difficult joins that were taking a long time. They had a ill-fated ETL process that would fail very frequently. And very frequently, the data that they were reporting to the executive branch was out of date because the ETL process took so long. So they started using Databricks as a data warehouse. This was several years ago. Today, that work has evolved pretty dramatically, where they're ingesting data from interviews for naturalization and visa applications, and they're finding fraud in there. They're making better use or better predictions in terms of which people are going to miss their appointments to make sure that the interviewers are more effectively used. And they're also analyzing the supporting documentation that comes in with these requests, birth certificates, passports, to find fraud within those. So they've really done an end-to-end modification of how they serve, immigrants. And it starts with the data ingest with an e-filing system and goes all the way through the analysis of visual records, all using Databricks. It's quite an accomplishment that USCIS has had.
Fantastic use case and a very important mission over there at USCIS. Tom, how about at Department of Navy, another very important mission? I know you have a lot of activity cooking over there. Give us an example of one program you'd like to highlight.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate the opportunity. And I think Kirsten and I are leading kind of parallel lives in this regard, and Alan as well. But so we stood up our enterprise data analytics platform about 2 years ago. And so the thing that I'd like to highlight about that is the lessons that we've learned for using the platform, implementing the platform, and actually coming up with the data. So at this stage, we have 83 documented use cases of folks that are using the platform to make some sort of analytics that drives decision and drives operational advantage, right? The interesting part here, though, is my very limited staff up at the CDO's office in the Secretariat We only directly support about 9 of those use cases, which is really, really powerful, right? So what that means is we've been able to essentially, I don't want to say democratize because I don't necessarily like that word when it comes to data, but we've been able to empower the workforce and give them the tools they need to do their job. And when we talk to the early adopters about the platform, the thing that they say that draws them into the platform is they're finally able to do what they need to do with tools that make sense in an environment that is controlled and safe to operate in. And so what that means is we've kind of lowered that barrier to data access, but we've also kind of stopped people from going off and say, finding creative ways to do what they needed to do that are maybe not so above board when it comes to cybersecurity and a variety of other things. So the big lesson learned here is now pivoting away from just purely providing access to data. And Kirsten said something about certified data sets. So we've really taken on this massive initiative around mastering our data. And so what we found through the process so far, and we've been doing it for a couple of months, is there's actually a relatively small number of master records that drive a tremendous amount of analytics. And so we've formalized the process now. So now that we have a formalized intake process, we know how many people are using the platform and for what needs. From that process, it tells us what data sets that they plan to use for their analytics, and things change obviously when you get into your analytics. So we've actually started a number of initiatives right now across a variety of different waterfronts to really get after creating what we're calling the gold data sets. And it was Howard, because we have Databricks inside our platform as well, and that's really one of the key components to our analytics, is rather than providing Databricks through the ETL process, whatever data comes in, right? We want to master that data and stick it in the Databricks so people have a common view of data. And so it supports really important things we have ongoing right now. Obviously, we have a COVID and kind of the vestiges of what we're trying to wrap up there. We have a very large destructive behaviors analysis that's going on right now for a variety of different reasons to pull out. And I think it was Howard mentioned earlier, actually, about the data being unstructured, right? And so a lot of our reporting that comes from the field comes in completely unstructured data. And so we have to pull out sentiments, we have to pull out entities, we have to pull out information from text. And that's not necessarily hard, but it's not easy either in some regard, right? It's time consuming, you got to train your algorithms. And so then combining that data with highly structured data we have coming, say, from our ERP systems, from some of our training systems, right? And so what we're seeing is those cross-entity joins is where that magic comes from analytics. And so I can't say that we have a single initiative necessarily, but it's that kind of epiphany that we had around the use of the data and structuring the data in a way that allows people to have more value from it.
And being done with a very small but powerful, we'll call it small and mighty. I'm going to call it the CDO SEAL Team 6.
That's right.
Group. It's incredible what you're doing there. We really do appreciate it. Nick, how about at Pure Storage? Can you give us an example? We have all kinds of use cases that are oozing out of this panel at this point. Give us an example of a program that you'd like to highlight.
Yeah, I'm going to pick up on Tom's thread. The Department of the Navy and Brett Vaughn, as the Chief AI Officer over there, deployed an AI as a service platform. And that continues to be pretty successful for us, and probably one of the best known infrastructure platforms, government owned, government operated, that we can talk about. Another one that we're really proud of is over the Virginia Tech Hume Center in the area of radio frequency machine learning for spectrum dominance. So those are, probably the prime time national security use cases that are published. We've had success within other agencies and across industry. Meta is our largest deployment, Facebook's AI Research Center. But we've been very fortunate to partner with great companies and great agencies in health sciences, genomics, pharmaceutical, financial services, autonomous vehicle areas as well. And really, this all goes right back to what Howard said. The nature of this data is unstructured. It's not your traditional row and column database. It's well-defined data sets. The beauty and the power of artificial intelligence models and algorithms is their ability to work with data the same way we do cognitively. So it's, again, you've got to be able to drive that data in order to get the maximum value out of it. And that's really where we focus.
Right. A lot of speeds and feeds, a lot of different formats, right? Including video and everything else. So We really do appreciate the capability that this technology brings to the table. And I think the first time I heard AI as a service, I think that's awesome. Matt, how about at Department of State? Give us an example of a program or a capability that you would like to highlight for the community.
Yeah, happy to. I'll highlight that our AI inventory is on the State Department website, so you can see a number of different use cases from a range of bureaus at the department. I'll tell you, the best part of working at the State Department is the diversity of mission. I met with the Special Envoy for Food Security a few weeks ago about data and analytics. I mean, who knew that we had a Special Envoy for Food Security? But it turns out critical, important mission, right? And
super important.
Yeah, and so I also want to point out there's kind of a dual mission when it comes to AI at the State Department, right? AI itself is a foreign policy issue. And then, of course, the use of AI internal to the department. And AI is a foreign policy issue. We engage internationally on emerging tech issues. The department has created a Bureau of Cyberspace and Digital Policy earlier this year to focus on that. And so that's a really important piece. My shop focuses on implementation within the department, and to give you an example, in that area would be cables analytics. The work of diplomacy is mainly carried out through language, right? In-person discussions, handshakes, right, and through written communication around the world. And so, as other panelists mentioned earlier, much of the department's data is unstructured. And so we have a number of NLP, natural language processing projects that are underway to automate the review and analysis of this kind of data, to provide insights to diplomats around the world. We have a challenge that's shared by a lot of us. We have colleagues who sift through an abundance of communication data. And so the more that we can accentuate the information that's most important for our coworkers' missions, the more effective and efficient we can be at administering foreign policy for the U.S.
Interesting dynamics there, and congratulations on that new unit that you all stood up. That's super important on this sort of global scale, if you will, from a State Department perspective. All right, we're going to take a short break and we'll be back in just a few minutes. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Network. Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Network. We are talking about data analytics, big data analytics, and small data, and artificial intelligence trends. And we're getting ready to start priorities, and I'm going to go over to Kirsten first and ask for your top 2 priorities that you are focused on this year.
Hard to kind of whittle it down, but I guess in thinking about this question, I mean, it's really about technology enabling and governance maturity as probably the top 2 things right now. So in technology enabling, as I mentioned earlier, we're enabling our cloud analytics platform. We have a number of different technologies across the data value chain, and we need to make sure that they all work together effectively. So, basically that means that if we've modeled the data, I want to make sure that all of my various products, my business intelligence tool, my geospatial tool, my data science tools can all read off of that shared data model. I don't want to manage multiple data models across all these different tools, which then has impacts on data quality and things like that. So we want to ensure that we're continuing to enable the technologies. We want to make sure our community, we want to grow our community to make sure that we have the right data science training available to them. We have communities of practice to bring together those different communities that are specializing in the different areas around the data science space. And then in governance maturity, I mean, we really do need to, and this is, I would say, across the government, we're continuing to grow our data literacy and data acumen. We need to make sure the entire workforce understands how much data impacts their daily work, their daily lives. So we want to, we have to continue growing that through the governance maturity. We need to make sure that we have a solid understanding of what our authoritative trusted data is, where we have the certified data sets we can enable for self-service. Enabling analytics governance, I think, is a really important one. As we enable this self-service, we need to make sure that we have a clear path for all of these data scientists across our agencies to have a path towards production. So what does that analytics governance process look like so that we have the clear delivery pipelines established? People know how to move their cool data product, this cool thing they built, from a proof of concept to an initial operating capability to a full operating capability. And that when it gets there, anyone looking at that product knows that they can trust it because it was derived from some type of certified data set. We all know that it's a safe data set to use. It was the right one to use. We've defined what all of the elements mean, things like that. So those are the big focus areas that I've been looking at, in this next 1 to 2 years.
Laser focus. Thank you. Matt, top 2 priorities at state.
Pretty easy question. People and infrastructure.
Okay.
We have a number of hiring initiatives going on. It seems like at any given time, but certainly now, we are interviewing data scientists, and we are preparing. We have announcements out on the street, and we are classifying new positions. And that's not just for data scientists within the Center for Analytics. It's also data scientists across the entire department. We are also establishing bureau level chief data officers so that we don't just have a CDO at the department level, but bureau positions. So if you want to be the chief data officer of international security and non-proliferation, pretty cool job. Those kind of positions will be opening up in the coming year. And so I'm really excited about that. It's just an amazing mission to be a part of, and want great people to join the team. On infrastructure, we're partnering with the CIO's team focused on resourcing and directing more bureaus across the department toward enterprise analytics infrastructure. We've onboarded something like 80 offices across the department. We have 10 cloud analytics services available to the enterprise. So there's a lot of great work. There's more to do. That's for sure. There's more to do, but it comes down to people and infrastructure at the end of the day, Luke.
Always more to do. It sounds like you've done quite a bit. Tom, how about at the Navy? Top 2 priorities for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first major priority is something I mentioned earlier, and that's the Master Data Initiative. But that actually leads us into data cataloging that helps us know what data we have, where it is, who's responsible for maintaining it. And something we've recently added to that is what we call the terms of use of the data. And so we want to tag all of our data with appropriate set of metadata that tells us who can have access to it, what kind of legal restrictions there might be associated with the data, and any sort of statute things, and what I could normally discretionary access sort of control on the data as well. And then that leads us directly into not only that information in the data catalog, but actually tagging the data to make that linkage, right? So that's a major initiative that we have ongoing right now that starts with that mastering of the data and the tagging of the data. And the other thing that we've just recently started, it's something that I tried to do about 2 years ago, and we just weren't mature enough in the platform and in our program to really get after it, but that's customer engagement. And that's really, and I think Kirsten mentioned it as well as Matt as well, it's really understanding who our customers are, understanding what their needs are, and sort of creating acumen programs and use programs tailored to their needs that allow them to maximize the time that they spend inside of our platform. And we've just started a number of training initiatives right now that are really focused on data scientists, which quite honestly, there's a lot of information out there to train data scientists. But when you have your basic digital citizen, an ensign who is just, come into the department or whatever, or a new Marine that has just landed, how do you get them to understand the value of data? How do you get them to understand whenever they're updating that maintenance record after, doing some sort of action on an aircraft, for example, understanding who's going to end up using that data and how that analytics applies. So we've stratified our workforce a little bit, and we're trying to create that tailored set of training. And so we're in this kind of existential debate right now about whether or not we have mandatory training or not around data. And so that's a little something that we need to get after. So I've actually been talking with the Federal CDO Council as well, and kind of how we can share some of the training initiatives we have ongoing right now. So I think it's an exciting time. It's really, that blossoming of that workforce combined with that data platform and the infrastructure, as Matt said, right, to really get after the use of the data for purposes that we've never been able to do in the past.
2 very important focus areas. Dr. Sim, top 2 priorities for you at CDC.
Very much like our other Fed partners, people and infrastructure. As it relates to infrastructure, like Thomas, we've already deployed an enterprise data catalog to enhance data discoverability. We're in the process of encouraging feedback from our centers to identify their high value data assets that can be cataloged in automated and more efficient ways. But by bringing them into the enterprise data analytics and visualization platform, having visibility about those high value data assets, and then going through the process that Kirsten mentioned in terms of the certification of those data assets so they become usable and less burdensome to manipulate by our customer base. So that's one aspect. The other infrastructure piece is part of DMI. It's an overarching strategy, which we're calling the North Star architecture. Within the North Star architecture is the development of building blocks, which are modular, reusable components of tools and services. One example of a building block is data exchange, which we often refer to as our front door, a single large pipe from our data providers and still partners to better facilitate bidirectional data exchange and movement to and from CDC. So these are intended to support the public health infrastructure, reducing the variance and variability of multiple siloed implementations into standardized building blocks, which can help us be more efficient in sharing data, releasing data more effectively, as our director, Dr. Walensky, has really pushed for. So thanks.
Very important focus areas. Well, we're going to wrap it up here, and we always like to wrap it up with this last question. Let's sort of paint a picture of the future, right? What's it going to look like in 2 years from now? Howard, let's start with you at Databricks. You know, what do you all have cooking over there? We talked about data lakes. We talked about data house. What's the demand signal look like 2 years from now?
You know, one of the things that we see, and I think Tom brought it up earlier, is there's a lot of training out there for data scientists because it's all open source. Whether you're using TensorFlow or PyTorch or XGBoost, all of these algorithms are built in the open source domain. And so one of the priorities for Databricks has always been open source. We were the creators of Apache Spark, of MLflow, which is the lifecycle management for machine learning workloads, our Delta file format, our Delta sharing capabilities. All of these things have been open sourced. And so we're going to continue to drive down that path, really focusing on open data. We want you to be able to put the data into a storage area and have other applications be able to read from it, because there's so much coming in the open source world that we don't want to lock the data in any particular way. Mm-hmm. So that's really something that we see coming down the pipe. The other thing, frankly, is just goes back to everything that all of our federal panelists have talked about, infrastructure and people. Well, on the infrastructure side, we have built Databricks so that today it's available in every single environment. So we have ATOs in FedRAMP, in FedRAMP High, in commercial clouds, in gov clouds. We even have Databricks ATO'd on IL6 platforms as well as on JWICs. So anywhere you want to run Databricks, and all of this comes from the fact that it's open by design. And these frameworks that we've delivered are downloaded literally 30 million times a month. So that talks about the popularity and the exposure that people can get to the Databricks technologies.
Keeping that innovation pipeline open, keeping that aperture open. I think that's fantastic. Nick, how about at Pure Storage? What are you all going to be focused on? What's that environment going to look like 2 years from now?
Well, you know, our company mission has always been to empower innovators to build a better world with data. So we're going to be focusing on improving the performance, capacity, and efficiency of the data infrastructure to allow even better results. Now, what's that actually look like? We've doubled the capacity of our primary unstructured systems every year since their launch. So wow. 2 years from now, we're talking anywhere between a 5 and 10x increase in capacity, and the adoption of higher performance buses and network protocols is going to see an order of magnitude increase in network throughput. So the really fun part about this is we actually won't make the systems physically any bigger or consume any more electricity. So it'll be a really dramatic increase in performance, capacity, scalability, and a tremendous improvement in power efficiency at the same time.
A lot of great focus there. We really do appreciate it. Nicholas, how about at Snowflake? Incredible capability that technology brings to the table. What can we expect 2 years from now?
Yeah, I mean, I'll actually echo my industry friends here, Howard and Nick. I mean, getting access to the data that you need when you need it through industry open standards, putting that in great tools that allow you to use that data to understand, build insights, and build capabilities, that's incredibly important. And the industry has settled on these standards and has brought people in to make these standards stick. They're used in every industry, in every government agency, every private company. I learned by doing, Luke, and for me, it's the ability to try new things and not really take a risk of building an infrastructure just to try something new. For me, the vision is being able to embrace the power of pivot, bring in infrastructure. The joke I always make is the red shirts from Star Trek. I don't want to bring a bunch of stuff in that I have to put into racks and give names like Thor and Zeus. I want to throw a bunch of servers at a problem, see if it works, and if it doesn't, just kill them off because I don't care. That's the power the cloud gives us. That's the ability the cloud gives us. And I think that's the vision for the future, being able to try and experiment with new data types and new algorithms to build better benefits for citizens.
Matt, if I'm a freshly minted foreign service officer and I'm getting issued a device out in the field, what kind of capability am I going to have in 2 years? Am I going to be able to do some citizen analytical development? Am I going to be able to do it in a high side environment? What's the situation there?
I think the dream is to, you might be out running an errand and all of a sudden you have to sub in for a meeting with your counterpart in a foreign government, and you can pull up on your phone and see what the latest engagement was. You can see what their voting coincidence is on a particular topic within the UN environment. You can understand, talking about Alan, the commitments on vaccine donations is something that we're focused on a foreign policy level right now. Having that data readily available, real time, and we can trust it day in and day out is it a future that we aspire to and that we're well on our way to achieving.
Certainly looking forward to that. Dr. Sim, 2 years from now, what do you think you're going to be doing in regards to CDC and being able to proffer up some of that information that you've been talking about over the last?
Well, obviously on the technology side, maturing what I described previously in terms of the North Star architecture, the building blocks, the EDAP platform. But honestly, my goal is non-technical. It is really about culture change. It's about getting programs, organizational units that have worked largely independent over the years, and for good reason, to now come together to recognize that their epidemiologists, their best and brightest shouldn't be focused on building infrastructure per se, but they should be used on developing models, predictive models, being more proactive, applying the science, and then allowing the infrastructure activities to be more automated and streamlined. And so my focus over the next couple of years is to really help with the culture change, to really galvanize all areas of CDC and public health to focus on what's important, and then leverage technology appropriately to achieve the mission. Thanks.
Love the idea of having that North Star there, and then everyone's rallying around that, whether it be policy, technology, implementation, et cetera. Kirsten, you are on a tear over there. You've got a lot of different activity going on. Looks like you got a nice solid framework in place that you're building on. What is your goal? What is your aspiration 2 years from now? What do you expect to see as you walk in the door over there?
So much of it really is about in building the culture and the customer experience. I mean, we often talk in my team about sort of the three-legged stool of the capabilities and infrastructure, the data, and the people. And so we want to make sure that we're really streamlining that customer experience for the people. I mean, we're realizing that while data science is a specialty skill set, more and more people are emerging from college with that skill set. And so the idea that it is a small community of people doing it is kind of no longer true. Everyone has this skill set. I mean, I recently launched a data science program and 75 people raised their hand to participate. I rolled it out again and now I'm over 100 people. Wow. And FERC only has 1,400 people. So, you know, we're hitting impressive. A lot of the workforce. So what that really tells me is we really need to be thoughtful about how we're creating that experience. So I often use this crazy cooking analogy where I want to make sure that our infrastructure provides that amazing kitchen for people to work from, that we have the perfect grocery store where people can go up and down the aisles and know exactly where to find the data, their ingredients that they need, that they know they're safe to eat, that it's reliable, it's authoritative, it's trusted, it's certified. And then they can bake amazing cakes as safely as possible. They can really be moved up the value chain and focus on really the cooking and what is the really great new cake that they can make. And then can we productionalize that cake? So I want to get them out of like hunting and gathering and trying to cook from camp stoves. And and then instead to make sure that they can bake, you know, an amazing cake. So it's really about that experience that we're thinking about.
That's a great analogy. You've got a lot of the panelists smiling, but I love the analogy there. And I think it's very relevant. Tom, if I am I know every Marine is a rifleman. I think that's what they say. And maybe they're a data scientist too, as Kirsten was pointing out. A couple of years from now, people coming out of the academy, et cetera, the men and women, what can you expect to see at the Department of Navy? What are you focused on over the next 2 years?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got a number of things in place right now that are starting to come to fruition. And I think probably over the next 2 years, well, I feel confident over the next 2 years that we are going to have that capability at Echelon, that we're going to be able to empower our customers and our users to have the data that they need, use the data that they need, and exploit the data that they need to create that operational advantage against our peer adversaries in a contested environment. And that's important, right? And so what we're really working on is bringing that tactical enterprise that is typically disadvantaged and disconnected, and maybe even operating in an austere environment together with that enterprise, right? Pushing analytics to the fringe. I know Nick and I have talked about this in the past, is really pushing that analytics as far down as possible and only bringing back what we need to bring back on the limited communication channels that we have, especially when we are in some sort of contested environment, right? And so that's going to be really important. And we have put the infrastructure into place now on both sides. Our challenge over the next years is bridging that together, bringing together to empower our senior leaders at every echelon throughout the department, and really creating that operational advantage against our peer adversaries.
Sounds like a great place to focus your attention. I really appreciate all of the guests today taking the time out of your busy schedules and fighting the good fight, enabling the mission. We really do appreciate it. I'd like to thank all of our sponsors for supporting us on this show. I'd like to thank the good people here at Federal News Network that make our program so successful and enjoyable. And most of all, I'd like to thank you, the listening audience out there that tune in every month. You've been listening to the Federal Executive Forum on the Federal News Network.